Welcome to the programme. President Donald Trump appears to have dialed back threats of an imminent strike on Iran. Speaking to reporters at the White House on Wednesday night, he said he's been assured that the killing of protesters has been halted and that no executions are being planned. Well, before he made those comments, Amnesty International published a report documenting mass killing of protesters on what it calls an unprecedented scale. The research group has spoken to eyewitnesses and reviewed video in order to get a clear picture of the extent of the crackdown. And joining me live now is Raha Bahreini. She's an Iran researcher at Amnesty International. Thank you very much for speaking to us today. We appreciate it.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Just give us a sense, first of all, of your key findings in this new report.
For the past week, we've been investigating the mass unlawful killings that the Iranian authorities have carried out on an unprecedented scale, particularly since the 8th of January. The massacre of protesters has taken place while the Iranian authorities maintain an internet shutdown to hide their crimes. This internet blackout, which is now in its 7th day, has impeded the ability of human rights organizations to conduct in-depth interviews and verify the death toll. However, the information that we have managed to gather shows a horrific situation. By official admission, 2,000 people have been killed. Human rights defenders are reporting a much higher death toll. What we have been able to document shows that the security forces have been relentlessly firing at protesters from a street level and elevated positions, such as the rooftops of mosques, residential buildings, and police stations, targeting many unarmed protesters in their head and chest. We have received the distressing accounts of medical workers who report that hospitals are overwhelmed with the injured, with many brought in with severe gunshot wounds. Morgues are overflowing with dead bodies. Distressing footage has emerged from a central morgue near Tehran that shows distressed families searching for their missing loved ones among body bags. We've received the account of an eyewitness from Raha who has seen bodies piled up in containers, freight containers. We have received the account of an eyewitness in a morgue in the central cemetery of Tehran who has seen bodies piled up in warehouses. The situation is devastating and shows that the Iranian authorities have once again resorted to mass unlawful killings, this time on an unprecedented scale, in order to wipe out dissent and silence protesters who demand fundamental change.
Yeah, you talk about an unprecedented scale of this crackdown by the authorities in Iran. Speak to us about how it is that you were able to conduct this research and reach that conclusion, because we know there's been this internet blackout in Iran. You mentioned it just there. So I can imagine it's been very difficult for you personally to speak to people in Iran, and perhaps there are some individuals who are actually putting themselves at risk in order to speak to you and get this information out.
It has been extremely challenging to conduct in-depth investigations. And this is the intention of the authorities, to block communication and to hide their mass international crimes. However, with the help of human rights defenders and journalists outside Iran, we have managed to obtain the screenshots of texts and voice messages that dozens of people from 9 provinces across Iran have shared. We have also been able to speak to several informed sources inside the country, including protesters and medical workers. We have also talked to dozens of journalists and human rights defenders and medical workers outside Iran who have managed to speak with sources inside the country who can access the internet through Starlink. Let me also note that the Iranian authorities are also reportedly trying to raid places where they believe Starlink devices exist. We have also verified dozens of distressing videos that show security forces firing at protesters who pose no threat whatsoever, warranting the use of force, let alone lethal firearms. The footage shows lifeless individuals on streets or on blood-stained hospital floors, or it shows protesters fleeing from gunfire or carrying injured protesters on their hands, while the Iranian authorities, the security forces, continue to shoot at them relentlessly. We've received the account of eyewitnesses who've reported how the security forces even fire at the homes of people who shelter fleeing protesters. In these accounts that we've received through text messages and voice messages from inside Iran, there are consistently urgent pleas for help and for global attention.
And look, I must ask you, you may have heard me mention what Donald Trump said at the top of the programme, that he has been assured, despite what you have just detailed for us here, that the killing of Iranian protesters has subsided. Can I ask you then, as someone who clearly is watching this extremely closely, is that true? Has the crackdown subsided? And to the best of your knowledge, are Iranians still in the streets?
Let us be clear. The Iranian authorities resort to mass killings to crush protests. They've been doing that repeatedly in recent years, and in the face of larger protests inside the country, they have now carried out a massacre on an unprecedented scale. The Iranian authorities, according to the information that we are currently receiving, have now created a militarized climate across cities in the country. Agents have been seen roaming the streets. Pickup trucks on top of which machine guns are mounted are patrolling the streets. The security forces are trying to force people to stay indoors. If the reports of killings have subsided, it's not because the security forces are respecting the right of people to protest. On the contrary, they have created a militarized climate where traumatized people right now cannot take to the streets. Thousands of victims' families and injured patients right now are in cemeteries and hospitals reeling from this devastating repression. We therefore call for global diplomatic action. The state members of the UN must recognize that it is consistent, continuing systemic impunity that is driving this protest bloodshed, and the international community has a duty to protect protesters from further bloodshed and to signal an end to the era of impunity that has emboldened the Iranian authorities to persist in their criminal conduct.
All right, Raha Bahreini talking to us. She is a researcher on Iran at Amnesty International. Thank you very much indeed for coming on to talk to us about what is extremely difficult research on that crackdown in Iran. Thank you very much.